Hello everyone, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's webinar, Actionable Data is Not an Oxymoron. My name is Chelsea, the Net Promoter Certified Marketing Associate at Splice, and I will be your MC for today's webinar. Before we get started, we have a couple of housekeeping items to walk through. Our webinar today will run about 30 minutes, with 10 to 15 minutes for questions at the end. All questions will be facilitated through the Q&A window that should appear on the right side of your screen. You may submit questions or comments at any time during the presentation. However, all questions will be addressed during the allotted time for Q&A at the end. Now, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Joe D'Agostino works within Audience Solutions at Axiom. He has extensive experience in the data management sector. Having worked in technology, purchasing, paid search, SEO, and much more, Joe is highly respected for his ability to create and manage accurate, clean data. And Sarah Kelly, CEO of Splice Software, has a passion for enabling clients to similarly engage in meaningful, data-driven dialogues with their customers that boost ROI and create delightful customer relationships. And to give some more context, here's a little bit about who we are. Splice Software is a privately owned Canadian company who helps insurance, finance, and retail companies deliver highly engaging, data-driven communication to customers via voice, SMS, email, and social channels. The Splice technology enhances business operations, service, and the customer experience. Axiom is a global marketing and technology company headquartered in Arkansas, USA, that helps businesses develop and act upon relevant customer insights. They specialize in new data solutions and were recently ranked within the highest scores obtainable for privacy and security in 2015 Forrester report and second highest for data resources in their market. Now this brings us to our event sponsor and partner, ClearPoint Claims, who provides insight and guidance on business and IT linkage in the insurance sector. During today's presentation, we're going to discuss best practices and use cases in parsing out-of-date and disorganized data so that you can improve your data standards and use that data to increase customer satisfaction, decrease inbound call volumes, and grow receivables. Off to you, Tara.
Thanks so much, Chelsea. So just setting the stage really and looking at today's environment, thought it'd be fun to look at a couple quick facts. So from U.S. Census data, 15% of U.S. households move each year. Now 15% doesn't sound like a very big number, and maybe 400 million people doesn't either, but that's 15% every year, and you look at how much that grows and moves, it starts to be a pretty big percentage if you consider when is the last time we actually updated the average customer's profile. If it was 5 years ago, that number, is obviously, that's quite a bit larger for you. So that's 65% could potentially have moved. And then you combine it with 6% of the U.S. population owns a second home. That's 15 million people. And one of the areas that we really work in at Splice and with Axiom is understanding the second home versus the primary residence and ensuring those data records are really accurate. And so some pretty big numbers to set the stage as we start to look at, the average insurance carrier and what you can do as far as making sure you can really take care of these people. Next slide, Chelsea. When we think about taking care of these policyholders, these people, it's always nice to really give them a name. And so we look at Jane here and Alex, and we say, what if we could reach Jane and Alex at the right time? What if we knew which address was correct for them? What if we could always know we were sending an adjuster to the home, the correct one, and we knew the time? And what if we were able to perceive their needs and be there for them throughout that journey? And so if there's a 15% chance they're moving every year, and there's a great chance that they're going to buy that secondary home, that vacation property, how can we set ourselves up to have the kind of customer experience and relationship with Jane and Alex that we really want? And that's going to be really powered by data. Off to you.
Hi, everyone. This is Joe. Thanks again for joining. I wanted to expand on the slide that Tara just went over where she talked about how many people are moving and just general things about your data changing. So this goes a step further. Here is where you can see changes in an hour. People are changing jobs, people are changing addresses, people are getting married and divorced, and people are declaring bankruptcy. These are all things that are changing the state of your data. And if your data is not up to date, your wasting time and resources on reaching the wrong people or reaching the right people at the wrong time. The most common thing that I see when companies start to think about hygiene is that they've only reached out to us when it's already too late. You know, a bunch of records have showed up as bad, or emails are bouncing back, phones are disconnected, so money and time are already lost if you wait until you have a crisis. Luckily, fixing and cleaning and updating and deduplicating your data is at the core of what Axiom does. So go ahead. So like I said, some of the most common things that you'll see will be bounced emails, disconnected phone numbers, and wrong addresses. Now, I want to give you a real-world example of something like this happening. My name's Joe D'Agostino. My dad's name is Joe D'Agostino, and my grandfather's name is Joe D'Agostino, and his father's name is Joe D'Agostino. So we used to live all in the same town or county. I was getting information and calls for their car insurance policies or homeowners insurance, or they were getting information on my renter's insurance and vice versa. So that's, again, just one real-world example of where your data needs to be clean and up-to-date and properly siloed. I mean, what if an adjuster had showed up at the wrong house? How much money would that cost a company if that's happening on, you know, a daily or weekly or monthly basis? This is why it's so important to update your data. Next slide. Not only can we clean up your data, but we can also enhance your data file with almost anything you could want. Income, interest, purchase propensities. So not only are we helping you reach people when there's a crisis, we can help you effectively identify the people that are going to be the best fit for your services going forward, and we're helping you reach them at the right place and the right time and measuring the results of everything we do together. Next slide. I wanted to share this slide because it's important to show that we're not just a U.S. company. We're providing the best data and data hygiene services across the world, and we're privacy compliant in all the places we operate in. So what this says is we're way ahead of the curve on privacy and compliance, and we're using the expertise that we're learning from these other countries and bringing it to each country that we work in. So in terms of data cleanliness, again, privacy, and just keeping everything up to date, we're way ahead of the curve. Next slide. If you haven't heard of us, you probably haven't heard of other people in the space, but I wanted to show you how we stack up against others in the space. This is on individual level accuracy rates of records. Phone and email, address updating, address missing, address cleanup, and email and phone records that are correct, and verification. So again, we're way ahead of the curve on the amount and the value and the quality of the information that we have. So I want to touch on something else that's listed here called Abilitech. Abilitech is our proprietary technology to link the right individual to the right records. And my real-world example is a good way to illustrate that. So let's say you have Joe D'Agostino, or you have one of my sisters gets married and her name changes. The record shouldn't fall off the map. You should work with somebody that's going to be able to figure out that this person moved, their name changed, maybe their name was spelled wrong on an input form, and that's what we can do with this Abilitech technology. Link all those records together, even if they're not perfect, and point them to the right person, and then clean them up. Next slide. Here's how we stack up against others in the space in terms of available records. Why is it important for me to show how many available, correct, up-to-date records that we have? Because if someone is going to tell you that some of your data is incorrect or needs to be cleaned or updated, they need to have the correct records to match against. Next slide. Again, we're using these records to clean up the following. We're fixing people at the individual level, at the household level. We're cleaning up your addresses. Just as importantly, we're standardizing your addresses, right? So let's say half of your files get put in and people are reversing the first name and last name, or some of the files don't have the full zip code, right? So this plus 5. Or some of the columns are changing as you're inputting things or importing things through a CSV. We're cleaning all that up. So it's the same format across the board. So regardless of how things are coming in, you can input them in the same way. Not only are we telling you which phone numbers are incorrect or disconnected, we're updating them. And as I mentioned before, we can suppress people that are either deceased or underage or part of our prison file. Next slide. So you've decided to make hygiene a priority. How should it work? We find that you'll have the most success if you don't just clean your data one time. It needs to be a regular process for your company. You need to do it monthly or quarterly. And most importantly, you have to work with a privacy-compliant partner. We were the first company of our kind in the space to have a chief privacy officer, and we continue to lead in the types of things that we do. We're constantly going to, to privacy forums or meeting with people that are leaders in the privacy space, again, because we're ahead of the curve, right? We don't wait until the laws change and someone tells us we have to change the way we operate or update the way we operate to be compliant. We're constantly, learning what the newest things are and making changes as needed. Next slide. So now that I've said all this, I want to show you a real-world use case that I think applies to everyone on the call. One of the insurance companies that we work with, they receive records from a quote aggregator, and their agents need to respond quickly. Typically, a lot of the records are either incorrect or the names are input wrong or the phone number is put in the wrong spot, whatever it is. But having the records come through that way, they can't really work with them. So they need a solution. Next slide. Again, and you probably started hearing this, we're cleaning, updating, verifying, and refining the data. Again, using that Abilitech data quality and recognition software that I talked about. The right instance of the right person to the right record, regardless of whether the name changed or something's been input incorrectly, we can tell you who the right person is. We're partnering with Splice to offer this to you because we realize and Splice realizes how important it is to you doing business to offer discounted pricing. We beat others in the space on quality and number of available records consistently every time. Next slide. So here are the results from the company that we worked with. Through our solutions, they're saving $200,000 a month and $3.6 million with an M annually. And now they've achieved the fastest agent enrollment that they've ever had. Next slide. So how does it work? You'll be glad to hear that it's not a huge process, right? You're not going to have to take a ton of people off other projects to work together, and it's really not that expensive. I mean, we're talking pennies per record, and sometimes fractions of a penny per record. There's a couple ways we can work together, but it always starts with you dropping out the file in a secure environment. Now that you've submitted the file, how do you know where to start? We run a report, called a DHA or a data health analysis, to just tell you what your file looks like right now. How many of the email addresses are bad? How many of the names are bad? How many of the names are in the wrong format? How many of the addresses have changed? Are some of the phone numbers disconnected? Just so you know what your file looks like today before doing anything with us. And then we'll work with you to figure out the best way to clean the whole file or part of the file for the things you're working on now and part of the file later in the year. You know, if you can't do it all in one chunk in the beginning. But also, we're looking at your data churn and we're telling you, should you be doing this monthly or quarterly? And we're setting up the plan to have that happen. So either you're dropping out the file, my computer just logged me out, give me 1 second. So you're dropping out the file, and we're cleaning it and sending it back, or we can even tie into an API and automatically clean the data monthly or quarterly. So all you would need to work with us, again, is your file, and usually a single point person. If we're doing the API, you only need to loop in one more tech person. Back to Sarah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Joe. So one of the things is really, how can we look at this and how can you action on it? And this is just a screenshot of some of the ways we can bring in that information for you. When you look at moving to that next state of making it actionable, picking priorities around customer experience, claims process, and looking for the opportunities, you want to know what level of opt-in you have that is fully cleaned and compliant data, other data. And these are graphs that we provide on the secure portal, our director. You can look at all the different sources and start to look at cleanliness by source as you prioritize it. Perhaps one of the very most valuable I find is this business of how many are mobile and how many are landlines. And again, this is something we're offering included for attendees and registrants of our webinar is a free look at how many mobile and how many land. And that's part of that health assessment, that data health assessment that we're offering. And so by looking at it, this is a really powerful place where you can say, you know, how many of our customers should be on our mobile app? What's that adoption rate? What should it be? How many of our customers have already opened up and offered us into that mobile life with them by offering their cell number and having new criteria and awareness of what that customer experience could be like? You know, what percentage of our database is still a landline? Is this something we need to accurately work on updating? How would we work within our customer journey to ensure that we're updating data points as frequently as we can in a really streamlined way for that customer, for that policyholder? Next screen, please, Chelsea. And if we look at voice and all the options of how we can work with them, it's really important to choose that channel wisely. And one of the areas that we've seen consistently and research shows is IVR and phone can still be one of your most powerful methods. For working through complex items, you absolutely want to drive them online. You want to get them filling out the forms there, but to get their attention and to build that relationship and to build confidence in the customer experience, you can clearly see people are continuing to choose the phone. And so with response rates in IVR being up to 69% and higher, whereas in email being 9.3 and online 4.9. And so these are response rates, not just research. So research is kind of almost an opposite. People are doing almost all their research on that mobile device. They're finding out everything about you, and then they're wanting to convert back in. And so making sure that your customer journey has accurate information in all of these areas really is an empowering moment. And so focusing on email accuracy and phone accuracy. And I think one of the areas, and Axiom can obviously speak to it as well, but the decay rate of email is dramatically higher than that of a phone number. And I think as individuals, we can relate to that. You know, you keep your phone number, you just keep moving it, but email addresses, most of us have several, and it can be rather challenging as your primary may change from time to time. So really choosing that channel that'll drive the right customer experience and really drive that, you know, net promoter score is ultimately what you want to do. Next slide, please. Voice messaging and voice as a medium has a lot of advantages as well as far as being a breakthrough technology. And some of these numbers can often surprise people and catch them off guard. One of these Splice advantages, and then I won't make it an advertisement past that, but is that we host over 10,000 first names in multiple languages, multiple dialects of that language. And because of that, even though it may start as a robotic call and the average person says, oh, I'm going to hang up, they hear their name in that first 2 seconds, and that holds them there. And so this graph we're looking at is showing the number of people that hang up at each different second of that message. And what you're looking at is that most people are right in there until that primary message is complete. 81% listen to 45 to 55 seconds of the message. And in those moments, if you have accurate data and you connect with them and you inform them of valuable things they need, they're immediately able to take the next action point. A/B testing can be challenging. This graph here is showing you several different colors. And so this group of people who were called are actually being segmented into different geographic regions. And I'd like to use this example because it really speaks to real-time, actionable ways to change a customer experience. So if you take a look at that green line, and it's kind of an outlier, you know, it's got a much higher drop-off point than anybody else, but then it seems to follow the pattern as the call goes. It turned out this was an area in the U.S. with a very large demographic of Spanish-speaking people, and it was really important to offer them a real-time change of language. And it was quite simple. This is a real client graph, actually. By simply doing a little bit of research, taking a look at this, we said, oh my goodness, this is very likely. Let's offer them an opportunity to switch to Spanish. And by doing that, we were able to bring this graph in alignment with the rest. There's really an opportunity to reach that higher level and drive action. And again, accurate data is where this all starts. And when you get the data right and you tell people information they need, it's pretty game-changing as far as the results that it drives. Next slide, please, Chelsea. The creation of the digital asset, and this is what we're talking about, how do you really build that really personalized, accurate information? It's a great process, and it all stems off of existing workflows. And so brand interactions can happen with the agent broker, they can happen online, in call center, multiple places, but we're going to give at all times that policyholder the opportunity to update consent and to update information. Then the customer list is typically coming out of a policy admin system, additional corporate rules around preference. You're also sometimes looking to a third-party system, and we'll talk about that a little bit. If you are using the Axiom API or another API for real-time data, I know weather-related data, often for pre-CAT claims, can be quite handy here as well. And these calls and these notifications can be driven by dates on a calendar or by flags in a system. So they can be data-driven by a flag or event-driven, and all of your scripts sit there fully personalized. And then it's spliced. We can crowdsource voice talents from all over the world and make sure it's the right language, the right dialect, and create that familiar, comfortable connection to really drive action. And so when we think about, next slide here, Chelsea, customer satisfaction and really changing the game for Jane and Alex and making sure that we're there for them through that journey and we're perceiving those needs, we need to make sure we're keeping that up-to-date data. Next slide, please. So experts are saying, and we talk about the loyalty and what that can mean. This is Accenture research. It's one of the white papers we're offering. Thank you for attending, and I think you'll find it super valuable as you build out this use case. Loyalty is dramatically declining. Only 29% of customers would say that they're highly satisfied. And at the end of the day, this is really driving very much a switching economy. According to Accenture research, 470 billion personal lines and P&C premiums will be in play, and that was in 2014, and the word is that 15, 16, 17 looks to continue to increase. We're really seeing game-changing players coming in and offering services that are very dynamic. And I think it's a phenomenal opportunity to look at your customer experience, look at your Net Promoter Score, and say, where can I connect with you better when you need it? And every great relationship starts with perspective and information, and that ultimately is something we call data. But if we look at it in our personal lives and our ability to take great care of people, it's about paying attention to little things. I'll pick on it, but you know, knowing what time your kid gets out of school and what address and what door they come out of, is that really different than knowing when your customer is in their secondary home in the summer or which phone number you should reach them at? These are data points, and they're absolutely critical to provide the customer experience that we're looking for and keeping people informed. Next slide, please. I'd like to use some math on this for a quick example, and you know, you can look at so earlier 15% of people moving, and what does that amount to in numbers, and not everyone moves, but these are some really quick numbers that make so much sense. 2014, we had only a Category 2, which isn't great, but certainly it was considered a light impact. And we look at what did that really cost us. So there were 44,000 people that saw property damage and made a claim as a result. And this is all information from Property Casualty 360, a great article, several other cases in here. But 30% of the data leads to wrong assignments, and that's assignments to adjusters. So if we look at 13,200 adjusters that went out there to an incorrect address that wasn't verified, that's not free. And a national average for sending on adjuster is $100, $110, $13. That's over $1 million. That's nearly $1.5 million of just pure waste, never mind the property damage and the claims. And these are these little examples that all of a sudden get really real really fast. And maybe you say, well, we're not, a ton of, we're not all on the coastline, or this isn't a major risk for us. maybe not. But I think the best part is, rather than leave it with a maybe, this is an opportunity to find out some facts on it. What is the accuracy of your data? If you had 44,000 claims, would you have 30% of your assignments go out to the wrong place? You know, how is that tracked today? And so it's kind of exciting with our partnership with Axiom to be able to offer you this free data health assessment. And it gives you tremendous data to make the use case, to make the business case, and also to look at where you feel your risk really lies. So some really easy numbers that help build a use case for, at the end, driving a better customer experience, and ultimately, though, very supported by the math. Next slide, please. So it's sort of a fun, easy way to look at the how. It can actually really be this simple. Your customer policy information sits in a policy admin, and some organizations will attach CRM. We'll go back here, yeah. There's a name, unique ID, primary, secondary, address, phone, and there's certainly other fields we could address and look at for you. You can add in the email, etc. But if we just brought it down to the simplest level and said, let's get third-party data on this, and maybe even you consider if it's, you know, catastrophic event related, bringing in weather data. These can be what these third-party providers are. It comes in through a really simple application interface, API, and we're able to map that back. Now, if you want to make it a real-time or any process to do record updates, you can, or you can simply use it to action for that item, and we can go out through the provider network and reach that policyholder. And it can be a really simple, safe process without changing or moving or reworking any of your core systems. These are services that are available a la carte, if you will, and of course there's the opportunity to build it into your workflow, but there's some really simple ways to pilot, test, and build out the use case and a business case within your organization. Next slide, please. At the end of the day, I really feel that, and customers will say, you can see it this simple, it truly is pennies. You're looking at pennies to integrate this, to reach the individuals, to save, you know, millions of dollars, and great efficiency. But it's not just the money saved today, it really is that customer experience, because they need you to be there for them in those critical times. And by having the right data, you're going to be able to do that twice as fast. Next slide, please. So we're offering you a chance to use that secure portal to go ahead and open a data playground, upload your record base. You can just browse and upload, drag and drop, however you want to do it here, and we will give you that graph. We will let you know what the opportunity is within your data, provide this back to you, and then you can take that information and we can say, here's some baby steps forward. You know, here's some parts of your customer experience journey that you're looking at having more communication, doing a better job keeping them informed, doing a better job responding, and just having an opportunity to look at what kind of change you could really drive. So I'll ask you to join me here in the next slide, Joe, and talk about, again, sort of what the offer is. We think this is an exciting offer to get some insight on that data you have.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so as we've already mentioned a couple times, if you're deciding that you want to make hygiene a regular process, and we think you should, you need to know where to start, right? Maybe your data's in a lot better shape than you think, or maybe it's in pretty bad shape, but you need to know what the landscape of the hygiene looks like. So how many duplicates do you have? How many names are in the wrong format? How many addresses are vacant? Who's passed away? Who's moved? What phone numbers are bouncing or disconnected? Really, again, just giving you the baseline of what your file looks like so you know where to start. Should you do it all at one time? Depending on your churn, should you work with us every month, every quarter? How should it work? Do you just want to clean up your phone numbers first and then work on the rest of it in piecemeal? This is just making a roadmap for you so you know where to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, for sure. Just adding in, absolutely. It's just a very simple opportunity to get that insight, and it's great data to build off of all the use cases with just that extra layer of accuracy. That is the offer. It's been great to have the time with you, Chelsea. We'll pass it back to you.
Okay, thanks, Tara. So to help you clean up your data, Axiom is offering a data health assessment So to express your interest in the special offer, please use the poll on the right side of your screen under the chat window. The poll will display for 3 minutes. So simply share your first and last name, company name, title, email, and phone number separated with a comma. And to complete the poll, click Submit. To follow the webinar, we will be distributing follow-up emails containing a link to the expression of interest form. You'll be given the opportunity to leave your contact information and identify one or more data content issues you'd like assessed. After submission, a SPLICE representative will contact you with next steps. Please submit your request by December 30th in order to be considered for the special offer. We'd like to open the discussion up for questions now. Please type your questions in the comment box and address them to one of the panelists, either SPLICE or Axiom. For this portion of the webinar, we have a surprise expert on the line, Rick McConville, Senior Sales Support Manager at Axiom. Rick is a Senior Professional Data Quality Solutions Architect with over 20 years of experience providing customers with the optimal data quality solutions. Now, we'll pause for a minute and wait for those questions to come in. Okay, so we have a couple of questions come in, so I'm going to go ahead and start rolling those out. The first question is, in your experience providing outbound customer messaging, how often should I complete a DHA to ensure I have accurate data, rather than waiting to see symptoms of outdated data?
That's a tough question. It's kind of loaded. I'll maybe take a first stab at it, and Joe, if you want to jump in with you here, that would be great. Yeah, so creating that frequency is a challenging question, and I think the first place is to know what is your current state and how much new data is coming in, right? So if you've done acquisitions, or if you've got new broker agencies coming in, et cetera, new adjusters, those can be reasons where the average accuracy changes, and that's something you're going to want to look at. So there's a lot of things that go into this mix. At the very minimum, you really want to be doing it quarterly, but the best case, of course, is to just get it to happen real time. When you go real time, frequently actually the cost is less than doing it as a project because you've built in the infrastructure to make it really count. And so I really would start by first looking at what is the consistency of your customer touch. What is the rate you currently have in your high-touch customer use cases? So first notice of loss, working through a claims process, what's the frequency, what's the average in your record, and are you guys doing any cross-sell, upsell, needs analysis? And if you've got a fairly well-mapped communication process of information for that customer, it's going to be really easy to do an ROI on having a real-time data cleansing. If you're in a situation where you're sort of reacting as it comes in, you might be able to get away with a quarterly. It depends on what those initial quality levels were like, because what you're really doing is aggregating up a loss as it gets poorer and poorer and poorer over time. And so a lot of that answer really does depend on what that initial quality level looks like, and then when you do a second spot check. So if you guys are able to go for a quarter keeping it really clean, great. But it depends on your data sources. Yeah, that would be our position on it. Joe?
Yeah. So I mean, in terms of the DHA, we've built it and we've kind of structured it so you really only have to do it once if you're going to make hygiene a regular process. I mean, so again, the report is giving you that baseline, and then if you decide to do monthly and quarterly hygiene, you don't necessarily need to do it again because we're on top of all the things that not only that the report told us from the get-go, but the things that are coming up every month or quarter.
Hopefully that answers it. So I guess if it's two parts, it's kind of one on the DHA, yeah, you should be able to do it once, and how frequently should you tie that in? It really should be built into your business process from the very beginning because that's where you're going to see the greatest results in the accuracy.
Yeah, and Tara's right, it's cheaper. It's cheaper to build it into a process. I mean, once you get over that first hump of cleaning it for the first time, it's much cheaper to just keep doing it.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for both of your responses. And that's a great segue into the next question we received. So I expressed interest in the aforementioned DHA. What is the cost to complete a DHA on a regular basis?
Perfect. I'll let Joe take this one. I'm wondering, too, if it's a constant DHA or just a keeping it clean. So maybe I would, yeah, go for keeping it clean.
Yeah, so again, I mean, you know, as part of the webinar, as we mentioned, I mean, for just the DHA for the report, we're offering the report at no cost. But maybe the question is, you know, what's the cost of cleaning the data monthly and quarterly? It's just pennies per record or a fraction of a penny per record, depending on the types of things we have to clean.
Yeah. And that's where I think being able to do the math based on the use case. So if you're in a situation where we're doing accuracy of address, you're looking at the potential savings of an adjuster wrong address. What's the percentage? You know, $113, a few pennies, however many hundreds of records, hundreds of thousands of records. That math makes sense really fast. If you're looking at catastrophic event notifications, you're going to be able to see that as well and do a use case on what that would be to be able to keep those customers. I think understanding what the churn cost is of customer churn is another math equation you can use to justify those, you know, literally pennies, if not less, fraction of a penny per record.
Oh, right, and think of the alternative. It costs, let's say it costs a penny to correct the record in real time, and then it costs 10 cents to fix the record, let's say, once it's in your database. And then if the record's already been used and it's wrong, it's costing you $1. So on the side of foregoing hygiene, it costs so much more money.
Yeah. Yeah. These are pretty great ROIs to work through together, and we love to help on that.
And one last thing I want to say, I mean, a lot of the people that we work with, in terms of hygiene, sometimes they say to us that they feel like the cost is almost too low, and the reason why we're able to do it so cheap, pennies a record, fraction of a penny per record, is because this is at the core of what we do. I mean, we've been doing this type of hygiene stuff for 50 years. So the infrastructure is built. We have the most marketable records in the space, period. And it's going to be the best and the most accurate solution that's available to you.
Great. Thank you so much. So that brings us to the third question, and I believe that this one is more directed at Splice in a slide that Tara spoke about previously. So the question is, are there any options to test my clean data in order to predict reach?
Yeah, sorry, Charles, I'll get you to clarify. Sorry, what for clean data predict reach?
So are there any options to test my clean data in order to predict reach?
Absolutely. So once you have this clean data, you can immediately go out for your customer reach, and you can look at, you know, what are we doing with email. If you have those accurate, it's awesome. Typically, you're in less than a 25% accuracy range on click-through. It's sort of so you go to something like voice, where you're looking at that 69% response rate. You have a really nice opportunity to check your reach rate and see and notify them and add in those customer satisfaction surveys, reach them proactively, and ensure that that's accurate. So there's several different ways you can add that into your journey and see if you're really getting the result you want. As you build in other things too, like permission and consent and preference, that's where it gets really powerful from the cross-sell and for perceiving customer needs, and that's when you're going to really start to get a whole other level of impact in customer loyalty by really taking care of them where they need to, when they need to.
That's great. Thank you so much, Tara. So our next question is, with outdated data discarded during a DHA, what is the best way to obtain new customer data?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
I was going to say, the DHA is telling you, right, the data that's out of date, and the best way to get new data, so it's twofold. If you're looking for prospecting data for new people to reach out to, we can help with that. And again, it's the best, cleanest, most privacy compliant, most up-to-date data available anywhere. But in terms of the hygiene side of it, we're telling you the records that are bad or wrong or need to be updated, and then we're updating them for you. So we can handle both sides of that coin.
Yeah. So a great way to do it is through integration for data updates, absolutely. I think the most natural way to do it, but you're not always talking to all your customers all the time, is inside the customer journey. And I think very similar to what we keep talking about is attaching things to the customer journey, is making sure that when you call in and you have that, notice of loss and you're in a claims process, updating some of those records, making sure that it's pushed throughout your system, that it's not just happening in one silo and not being propagated, because that can create a broken customer journey. And it's really, there's opportunities every time that customer reaches out to you to update the information, whether it's online, whether it's with a broker, agent, whatever is happening. And so ensuring that you're thinking about it throughout the customer journey is just a great discipline to get in the habit of. Small data is constantly being volunteered, and some of the most powerful data is the volunteered data. But for things like, I got married and I didn't think to tell my insurance company my last name changed, yeah, you probably want to buy that and do that. Don't make that her job. She had to tell, 20 other people, so she's busy. So there's definitely a need for both, and I think you want to build it into your process as soon as possible.
Great. Thank you so much, Tara. So this brings me to the next question, and I believe this is directed at a slide Joe spoke about previously. So what is Abilitech doing to garner the greatest data accuracy when compared to other organizations?
Sure. So one of the key differentiators between us and others in the space, aside from everything that I talked about, is that our data is multi-sourced. Right? So some of it's publicly available, some of it we're sourcing, some of it we're getting through partners, and we're matching it and cleaning it all against each other. So, we're not just getting it for one source and hoping it doesn't change. We're constantly revising and refining the data that falls in the bucket of correct. Right? So Abilitech is the proprietary way for us to link that all together and to link instances of an individual that might only be slightly incorrect or out of date and pointing them to the right record. So the things that are happening to me, or I should say were happening to me and my father and his father and his father, don't happen, right? You don't want an adjuster to show up at the wrong house just because we both live in the same town or city or I used to live 5 minutes away from my grandfather, right? You don't want the adjuster to show up there because that's a waste of the person's time and money. So Abilitech is the technology that takes all the sources that we have that nobody else has access to and tells you that these 10 instances, these 10 records that look the same but have some changes or the address has changed, this is the person. This is all attributed to this person. Does that answer your question?
Definitely.
Okay.
Great, thanks so much. Our next question is based on a previous DHA slide. So what is a mobile and landline split?
That's probably me, Joe. So a mobile landline split is simply the number of phone numbers that are a landline into someone's home versus the number that are a mobile or cellular phone number that's been provided. And we think it's really critical. A lot of times through data aggregation, those things can get tagged wrong or they're volunteered wrong from the beginning or entered wrong. And so knowing if you're going out to a mobile line or a landline gives you a lot of different accuracy opportunities as far as what you should be recommending for the greatest customer journey. So if you know you're going out to a mobile phone, it's 90% chance you're going out to a smart device. You're going to want to build out that full experience, whether it's sending a link to bringing them into your page to capture that data to make their life seamless. If you're in a landline, let's not offer them things that they're not actively going to use, but maybe we want to ask them, would you rather an email? Would you rather, can we get a consent for SMS, etc. And so the split is just simply how it sounds. The value can be a lot more, a lot more complex and build out options that really give a powerful customer journey.
Great. That's a great response. Thanks, Tara. And the last question we have for today is open to any of the panelists. How do you recommend I pitch this concept optimally in order to gain executive buy-in?
Sarah, can I jump in?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so usually the way we see it done is we've had a lot of success with, the math that I mentioned, and Tara, I think we can make that equation. I was using the 110, 100 available later.
Sure.
Because that gives you kind of the potential cost of not cleaning your data at a per record basis, and then you can just multiply it by how big, how big the universe of record is. And the DHA also includes a sample return on investment based on what we're returning. And again, I think it's important to drive home that we're talking, in terms of how you interface with us, drop us a file, give us one point person to work with, maybe one tech person if we have an API. That's it. So it's not something that you need to kind of put on the roadmap 6 months down the line. And we built it that way because we realized it doesn't make sense if that was the way it was put together. We want to make it as easy and as simple as possible for you to get started and to keep working with us.
Yeah. Great points, Joe, for sure. And I think it can be that simple. So step one is determining that business use case. And I think for every organization, it's going to be somewhat unique which areas they're targeting within the organization. Are you sort of doing an incubator style of change, or are you building it into various workflow? But step one, for sure, is picking the use case and then knowing what data is accurate to what level, and that will give you the metric on your risk. So if your goal is to move customer satisfaction, your NPS score by a certain percentile, bringing people into a promoter status, what is that worth to your organization? Has that been monetized? But if your goal is to reduce, accuracy or inbound calls on forms being incomplete or these type of things, there's a huge opportunity to just directly apply the math of that use case. But knowing what the accuracy rate of the data is where you're going to build the math. And you might look at something and say, you know what, this just doesn't happen enough. Yeah, our data here stinks, but it's not killing us. I think this area is the one that really is. We really need to get this accurate. And so that's where having the numbers in front of you will help you build that out. The first thing is picking your business case and then running the math and the size of the data and the number of interactions multiplied by your accuracy rate, and you're starting to build out that business case and looking at it. One of the other pieces I always like to tell people when we're kicking it off, always ask yourself, which reports do we already know how to run and they're easy for us to measure, because that will reduce any internal pain dramatically if it's a report that you already know exactly how it's going to be affected and you can continue to run that same report. Definitely makes life easier, and that saves you money.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So I guess that's all the time we have for our webinar today. Please look out for our follow-up emails that will alert you with any material you missed or that you can share with your colleagues. On behalf of myself, Axiom, and Splice Software, we thank you for joining us today. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.